This is the Russini Report. With the Athletic senior NFL insider, Dianna Russini.
Welcome to the Athletic Football Show and this week's Russini Report. I'm Robert Mays. Joining me today, it is the Athletics senior NFL insider, Dianna Russini. Dianna, how are you?
I'm good. I feel like I'm a one-woman local news network lately. So because of all the great information coming out of the NFL over the weekend, I got to do a little entertainment, right? We had Taylor Swift. I did a little bit of weather updates, news, sports. So I don't know what my call letters would be, just DMR. But I feel like I'm in that local news grind right now, everywhere, reporting on everything, because that's kind of what the league is about. It's touching on all facets of the world.
We got a little jersey today along with the NFL news that you're bringing to us, which I really enjoy. There's a lot for us to dig into today. I wanted to start with something that you put out, I believe, on Friday on your Twitter account. And this was about Joe Burrow and about not his status with the Bengals in terms of how he might play, but the decision about whether he would play and the discussion that was happening in that building, weighing the pros and cons on each side. So I would love to just hear about what led up to the decision to ultimately put him in the game on Monday night and what those two factions within the Bengals building looked like as they reached that conclusion.
So I think it's important to point out that Joe Burrow has never been 100% coming off the calf injury that we saw him deal with in the summertime during training camp. So even though we saw him back out of practice, saw him playing the games, it was never at 100% where he just felt so good. So there's always been concerns. And then we saw against the Cleveland Browns, and I had somebody in Cincinnati tell me right before the game that just watch Joe outside the pocket. Watch how little you'll probably see. And that's exactly what wound up happening. And granted, it was a very wet reading. We saw it all. And a lot of it had to do with the calf. So fast forward to where we're at last night. And obviously, he's still not 100%, and he's not going to be. He woke up today also feeling really sore. How could he not, right? After playing at full game speed like that. But with that in mind, the approach to playing him, it wasn't completely split down the middle in the organization like a 50-50. It was just you had a lot of different opinions about whether or not the Cincinnati Bengals should move forward with the face of their franchise, their quarterback injured, and perhaps put him in a position where he would re-injure it, or put him out there at 65, 70% and attempt to get the win, which is what they do to try to dig them out of potentially going 0-3. And we know statistically what that would mean if they did. So this gave them life, hope, and perhaps maybe a playoff potential now, depending on how Joe looks. But the problem is with this, though, Robert, is so now it's sore. It's definitely not 100%. He didn't retweak it. So that's really good news. So now it's all about the rest. And I would be very interested to see how Cincy manages this and his workload as they get ready to face our pretty fierce pass rush and defense in the Tennessee Titans.
It's a fascinating decision to make because I understand the arguments on both sides. You're 0-2. You came into this season with such real urgency and real championship level aspirations. And if you start 0-3, those go out the window. And for you to feel that way about your team throughout training camp and in the middle of August to go from your season being over on September 25th, that's a really tough thing to stomach. So the people that thought we just need to get him out there, we need to salvage this one, we'll get there. I understand that. But I also understand people probably on the other side thinking, we just gave this guy $250 million. He's 27 years old. We have a young core on this team. We have to take the long view on this. So that kind of back and forth and that potential friction and ultimately a decision that they landed on, I get both sides of it, but I'm sure it was an interesting week for the Bengals and how they eventually arrived at that moment.
And they were keeping it very quiet. And when I talk about people having different opinions, I'm not just talking about people in the front office, people in the coaching staff. I'm talking about players in the locker room. I mean, you go back to what Jamar Chase even said during the initial injury, which is take 5 weeks. Take all the time you need. And there are still guys on this roster. Of course they want Joe out there. They know he's their best shot. But they also believe that they could perhaps maybe get a win without him by, maybe finding a way without him. But now they're in a position where I think this is going to be a week to week battle. This isn't going to get any easier for them.
Is there a thought that if it doesn't tweak it again, even if he's playing on it, that it will incrementally get better over time? If they can just buy time for, let's say, the next 3 weeks until I believe their buy is in week 7, that if it doesn't get re-injured, it will get better over the course of the season?
That's the hope, but I think anyone watching this or listening can understand we've all had strains and muscle pulls. The only way to really get over that big hump is rest.
Mhm.
And when he's going out there and playing and putting that pressure on it and putting his weight on it and moving and doing all the things that you need to do at a quarterback, as a quarterback, you're constantly re-aggravating it by just using it. So we'll see how they'll try to make sure that workload is fair so he can still prepare and get ready, but also not put himself in a position where he re-injures it.
So there's a very good chance that he's going to be dealing with this throughout the entire season. And we've already seen how it's affecting him. He's struggling to push the ball downfield. Through 3 games, Joe Burrow is the only quarterback in the NFL that has not scrambled. The Bengals have a 0% scramble rate so far this year. So this might just be the version of Joe Burrow, even if it does get incrementally better over the course of the season, that the Bengals are going to have to deal with. But the hope is if you throw the ball to Jamar Chase 20 times a game and you get some great play from your defense like they did last night, it'll be enough to keep them afloat in the AFC. And we'll see about that.
Yep. And that's going to be the key. And the thing is, they knew that even going into the game last night, knowing the version of Joe they were going to get. They saw it during the week. They understand what he's dealing with, which is why, I talked to 2 defensive players leading into the game, and they knew this was their opportunity and really their responsibility.
The Bengals avoided going 0-3 last night. We'll talk about 2 other 0-3 teams here. I know you checked in with the Broncos yesterday, and after this horrific performance that they had against the Dolphins, what is the mood in Denver right now after them getting run off the field essentially by Miami?
Yeah, so Tuesdays are install day, right? So today's like a really big day in the building. This is where everyone meets together and they start game planning and put together what this week is going to look like in their preparations for the Chicago Bears. And having a few conversations in the building with people there that have been there since yesterday. Obviously, ownership, GM, head coach, coaches, trainers, everyone's in there. Players too, as well, getting treatment. The mood was, we have to turn the page. All right, we're over this. We wiped our tears. We all felt embarrassed. But there were also some good things, especially on the offensive side of the ball, that we can build on. The defensive side, and I think Sean Payton was actually pretty transparent about how he felt after the game, pointing to the defense. And I don't think he could put it all on them, but that was certainly an area, a Denver Broncos defense that should be the strength of this team, let them down tremendously against the Miami Dolphins. So I thought the mood was going to be a little bit more depressing, but it wasn't. I think sometimes when you bring in a head coach like Sean Payton, there a lot of good and bad come with it. But I think a strength, let's highlight some of that right now, is they've been through a lot worse. They've seen this before. He went 0-4 with the Saints before. They're not there yet, but they know what it's like. And there's no panic, right? When you come from that Bill Parcells tree, the mindset's always the same. It's my job to figure out how to win with what I got, not make excuses for it. And I think that's where the work is going into it this week, where the coaching staff is really working and leaning into the teaching side of the job to try to fine tune those details to make them better.
The whole point of bringing Sean Payton in is that there was supposed to be an adult in the room. They were supposed to be a put together NFL team. I mean, the terms that he used in that Jared Bell USA Today story when talking about Nate Hackett last year, terms like embarrassing, historically bad coaching jobs. They had a historically bad performance on Sunday. So I'm questioning and I'm curious the relationships he has with ownership right now, with the GM right now. We knew this was going to be a long-term bet when you go get a guy like Sean Payton, but is there any sort of consternation from the other people in the building who maybe aren't Sean Payton and how they're feeling about the way the team has looked through the first 3 weeks, especially coming off of last year?
Yeah, he has this tremendous ability on the field, in the room, in the building to almost have all control and all power, even if that's not his title. Because he is so efficient at the details and has the discipline to pay attention to it so much. I remember talking to guys in New Orleans when I first started covering them because he and I did not get along at all. And the only way I thought I could maybe get to know him was just through the players to kind of pick their brains. And I mean, they all kind of said the same thing, which is like, you've got no shot because he's just a man on a mission and he is very focused on what he needs to get done. But that being said, and I do think this is where he is great, is he likes people that want to learn. And he wants people, he likes to surround himself with people who look to him for answers. And I think he's searching for some of those type of players on his roster now. And in terms of the relationships in the building, because I do think when you lose like that, in that fashion, that many points, and there's just such a drastic difference between an offense that looks just okay and an offense that looks like they can win a Super Bowl right now. A lot of questions could be had. And I don't sense panic out of Denver. I sense we're in this together. We got to fix this, but we're also only 3 games in. And I think that's a lot of the storylines around the league right now, the good teams and the bad teams, of it's still early. We're trying to find ourselves. Now, I'm sure there's some regret there that Sean Payton had about taking those shots against Nathaniel Hackett now that he's in the role dealing with what he's dealing with.
We had so much conversation and focus this summer about what the Sean Payton Russell Wilson relationship would look like. And they've been functional on offense, certainly better than they looked last year. But just that working relationship, where does it sit 3 weeks into the season, and what has it been like for them so far?
This one surprises me. I thought that there would be more challenges there between them because of the strong personalities, because of ego. And all I hear continually, and it's been very consistent since probably mid-August when they started to really be around each other in the grind, to now where it's a really good working relationship. They like one another. They joke with each other from what I hear. There's a bond there that's being built. And maybe it's a bond that has been created because so many people want to see both of them fail, that they're uniting on it. Like, you know what? Let's show them that we're better than what they think we are right now, because people like to put the target on both of their backs. The relationship that Drew Brees had with Sean Payton all those years, when you just look at the pictures and the videos, it looks just like it was rainbows and unicorns. That is so not the truth. I was around, I witnessed issues, healthy relationship building and differences, but they were really hard on each other. So I think they're trying to work towards getting there. And remember, Russell Wilson's got that line of communication of Drew to really try to understand this head coach, to try to see how he can get the most out of it and really how they can make each other better.
Luckily for the Broncos, they face the 0-3 Bears this week. It's a good potential chance to get back on track. It really does feel like the sky is falling in Chicago right now. As someone who lives here and is around the conversation that surrounds this team, do they feel that way? Do they feel like this is getting out of hand and the season is slipping away from them a little bit after you talk to people in the building?
It's funny. I feel like we should rank the order of panic in terms of depression. Right? Because I just was talking about the Broncos where, the sense I get is we got to just fix stuff. We got to get better. We got to push each other. We got to point the finger at ourselves, right? Whereas Chicago kind of has done a really good job of insulating themselves from all of this. Everything that went on last week, all the headlines, all the emotions that everyone was tweeting about and reporting about, that it just seemed like the place was a disaster. And then I have conversations the night before the game with people all across the organization, some high level, some players, some coaches. And I was getting very similar messaging, which is, you guys are all freaking out way more than we are. We're locked in. We're trying to win a game. And I think internally, they actually have done a really good job of trying to galvanize everyone and bring them together of we can't give in. We did see the performance though on Sunday, and the football is just not good. It's not good right now, and we have to start asking the questions of, at some point here, is the coaching staff going to sit with the owners and say, What are we going to do here? How are we going to make this better? And is this our future?" And I think it's probably a little too early for that conversation, but you have to figure that's going to be had at some point over the next few weeks.
It honestly doesn't feel like it's that early based on some of the stuff that you see being kicked around right now. We've gotten to the point where the biggest thing about the Bears as people look forward is, are they going to be able to be in position to get the number one pick in the draft again? Like, that is actually happening. We've already arrived at that point. They're playing the Broncos this week. The Panthers are playing the Vikings. There is a real chance that by the end of this weekend, the Bears will own the first round pick of the only two remaining 0-4 teams in the NFL, with them in Carolina. So then you start looking forward. But if the Bears get the number one pick in the draft, or if they're picking in the top 5 again, a very reasonable question to ask is this staff going to be around to pick, oversee, and develop the next quarterback in the next phase of this team?
This is a quarterback that was in conversations of potentially being an MVP this season, based on some of the improvements he made in his game towards the second half of the season last year. His mobility, the Cam Newton analogy, comparisons that we kept hearing of what he could potentially be like if they got it right. So we went from that to this to now, are they tanking?
3 weeks.
There is a disconnect. Something happened. Something got lost in this. And you have to wonder if the new Bears officials that are in place are looking at this going, what are we doing here? How did we get here? And how can we get rid of the people that are standing in the way?
You're talking about Kevin Warren, who is their new president. It's the first time they've had somebody in that role in a very long time. And he was not there when they made these hires and when this version of the organization was put in place. So we are on the fast track, seemingly, to some very hard questions being asked about the way that this organization is structured as we get toward the end of the season. And it's just not a place that many people envisioned this team would be again.
Yeah. I'm very intrigued by Kevin Warren's role and how he sees all this and how much patience he truly has watching this unfold. I mean, this is somebody who has years of experience with the Minnesota Vikings. We know he was the Big Ten commissioner last year, but what has he learned from his time there with the Rams that either makes him sit here and go, okay, we just need a little bit more time, or perhaps based on his history, he's going to go, you know what? Let's scrap this now. This isn't going to happen on my watch. So I think he's going to be a very significant player, obviously, in these decisions coming up.
There have been so many things flying around in the past week about what's going on with Alan Williams, their former defensive coordinator, and his resignation. Can you just quickly summarize in a couple sentences where that situation stands and what you've been able to report about it over the last 7 days or so?
Yeah, so there has been no police activity involved in this. There's nothing criminal. There was never an FBI raid at the facility or at his home. This has been categorized as a personal matter. Nobody has really come forward to give the specific example or the specific reason why. From the Bears side of this, they were told it's a personal situation involving his family and that he was resigning to take care of that business. In which the Bears then accepted his resignation, and in preparation for that, wanted to make sure that all their I's were dotted and T's were crossed from a business side of this. So they had an IT specialist, that we reported as a forensic van that was on the property. And it sounds so much worse than it is, but that's truly what it is. But it's really just an IT person coming and scanning.
Human relations matter.
Exactly. Just making sure they've got copies of everything in case there's future litigation for whatever reason. So this is all pretty standard. I know I'm married to someone in human resources, so I know all this stuff very well. I consider myself a little mini expert. But once I found out that this was just part of the process to protect the Chicago Bears, I said, okay, this all makes sense now. But I think it's important to clear the air that there is no criminal involvement here. And the Chicago Bears are not sitting here concerned or worried that that is an issue in the future.
Human resources is the very popular phrase and very known phrase that I meant to say there, by the way. Let's keep with the teams just facing down a decent amount of existential dread these days. Let's get to the New York Jets and their quarterback situation. Robert Saleh comes out early this week, says that Zach Wilson is the unquestioned starter, that they are sticking with Zach Wilson. That's where they are right now. Here's my very simple question to you about this. Why? Why is Zach Wilson in this position where they are so comfortable rolling with him despite everything that they've seen, not only over the last couple games, but last season, that eventually led them to go to Mike White when they needed to and feel like they had to make a substantial and urgent move to go get a guy like Aaron Rodgers?
I spoke with somebody with the Jets today and asked the exact question. Why? Why do you have any confidence that Zach Wilson can win you games? And I'm still very surprised that the answer is always, well, he's made such significant progress. He's looked good in practice. He's better. He's better than what he was. And we think he's better internally based on the things that we're asking him to do. Because I do think there's other parts to this. Like, we have to start with the biggest problem on this Jets team. It is their offensive line. Yeah, it's a lot of Zach Wilson. But this offensive line would have been a problem with Aaron Rodgers. And you have an offense that has been installed, that this team has been running for 3 games. That's it. It's very new to them still in terms of live action. And the belief is that Zach has learned the most of any other quarterback that they would just bring on. Now, they did sign Trevor Siemian, or at least he's expected to sign if his physical is passed. He'll be part of the practice squad, and then I'm sure they will activate him. And I've covered Trevor for many years, and it's always the same story with him. He's really smart, like really, really smart. He can hop in and learn an offense at quicker than anyone. Can he run the offense? I don't know. I don't think at a very high level, but I think he at least can conceptualize and understand what they're trying to do in New York, which is why they signed him. But back to Zach. Okay, so I think we also need to take a look at what they're asking Zach to do. This is an offense that was built for Aaron Rodgers, right? So they need to adjust to make sure the strengths of what Zach is doing is in this game plan. And they're leaning more on this run game, and they're leaning on a defense that's been together for 3 years versus trying to make this work under what they've done this all summer with, because that's where I see the problems.
I understand that. I watched Gardner Minshew come in mid-game. Gardner Minshew's like a 5'11" guy who can't really move that well. He replaced Anthony Richardson, who's the best athlete we've ever seen play quarterback in the NFL, and they absolutely shredded the Texans over the course of that entire game. Like, we've seen teams play with backup quarterbacks all the time, and they reach a level of functionality that the Jets don't seem to be capable of reaching. So I want to play out this hypothetical for you. Let's say it keeps going down this road. Let's say the Jets have arguably the worst or a bottom 3 offense over the course of the regular season. They go 7-10. That seems like a rosy outlook. What is a lost season like that? And that is a lost season when you compare it to the preseason expectations that they had. What does that mean for the people in charge there? For Robert Saleh, for Joe Douglas? Can they go to Woody Johnson and say, listen, quarterback was hurt. What are you going to do about it? Or, coming off the heels of a disappointing finish to last year, is there more urgency and more demands on their ability to provide results right now?
Well, it's a Bill Parcells way of saying of, you need to figure out how to win with what you have. And we talked about that in reference to Sean Payton and Russell Wilson in Denver. And I think you can apply that same mentality in New York with, yeah, maybe it's not perfect. It's not the guy we want, but it's at least got to be presentable. There's got to be effort there. Now, look, the mood in the building, it wavers. It does. Sometimes I feel like I talk to people there and the sky is falling. They're still upset about losing Aaron. How could they not? And then there's times where I feel like they're rejuvenated. They're ignited. You got guys like Todd Downing I hear in the building, just like keeping everyone together. And then you hear that, and you think maybe you're going to see something on the field that is going to reflect some of that leadership that's happening behind closed doors, of them trying to come together. I think the Jets are looking at this as a week-to-week situation. I believe that they're going to see what happens these first 6 games and then meet up and assess what are they going to do moving forward here. What is the game plan? I think for now there's not panic of, oh my gosh, we're going to have a losing season. I think we just need to see a little bit more. They're a little bit more patient than I think the rest of the Jets fan base at this point. That is the true sense I get. And this is talking to a lot of people in this building. I have not had a conversation with anyone in New York that is freaking out to a point where they think they're getting fired this month. It's got to be better. There's got to be effort. It's got to be productive. It's got to look like we're putting together something on the field. And I think they just want to give it a few more weeks here.
They might not get fired this month, but unless I had assurances from the people in charge that we get a rain check on this year because of what happened with Aaron, I don't know if you can let it go 6 weeks because your season might be
Robert,
over.
we talked about this last week. Even if Woody Johnson said to Robert Saleh, I will not fire you because of this, I would not take his word. He said the same thing to Eric Mangini when they signed Brett Favre. Guess who got fired? Eric Mangini.
So if that is what we're dealing with here, are we at a place where if we get 1 more week of this or 2 more weeks of this, you start going down a road where you have to pick up the phone and start making calls about things like Kirk Cousins or Ryan Tannehill or some other solution like that? Or do you feel like that's just not even on the table no matter how bad this turns?
I've spoken to Minnesota. I've spoken to Tennessee. They have not received a phone call from the New York Jets at all. Not one call. Not one little, what are you thinking? Wink, wink. Maybe, maybe, maybe. Nothing. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. I'm just telling you the people I talked to in all 3 of those places have told me no.
I feel like we're gonna have to do this every single week because you're gonna have to come
every week. I want to do this. I want you to say the same thing every week too. I don't know. Would you trust Woody? And I'm going to say the same thing every time. No.
I just can't. That's all I can think about because if I'm sitting there staring down my job security and I look at the way that Zach Wilson is playing, those 2 things just do not compute to me. So I maybe just want to give wink, wink, nudge, what nudge, nudge. I want to give one to Robert Saleh, just like elbow him a little bit, being like, have you looked at Kirk's contract? It's $10 million base salary. He's not under contract for next year. The Vikings are winless. Just pick up the phone. Just see what it would take. Call Mike McCartney. Call his agent. Be like, hey, you know what? Would he be interested in coming here? We're a potential playoff team. Just start exploring it a little bit because at this point, what is the downside? Who are you worried about upsetting?
It's true. I mean, you and I had a little bit of a theory last week when we talked about this. How much is there an Aaron Rodgers effect here? Influence, an influence here where he's taken Zach under his wing. He's coaching him up. They have a personal relationship. How much is Aaron saying, let's make this work with him? I don't know that. This is a team that's sticking with Zach Wilson right now.
Let's talk about some of the injuries from this week very quickly. We can run through these. Derek Carr injured his shoulder in this game. What's the latest on Derek Carr? When can we expect to see him again?
Yeah, so I think there's a small chance that he plays this upcoming weekend. When you have this type of AC joint injury, it's actually pretty varied when you look at it historically of players that have had these. Some have come back pretty quickly. The original reporting on it was that this would be week to week, and that's still the thought in New Orleans. So I think let's just say he doesn't play this weekend. I think there's a good chance we could see him. I don't see a scenario at this point where he's missing 3-4 games and it's a Jameis Winston show.
Which is important because in the NFC, they're very much in the thick of this thing. And losing 2 in a row and losing the way that they did on Sunday, that kind of ground in what is potentially a pretty competitive NFC wildcard race, something to keep an eye on for the Saints. A couple others to hit on right now. What's the latest with Saquon Barkley? Obviously, he missed last Thursday's game on a short week, but it sounded like he was closer to playing than maybe all of us had anticipated. So is there a chance that we see Saquon this week in week 4?
Yeah, it's a high ankle sprain, and we know historically with the Giants, they have rushed him before, and it does not work. He's re-injured it. I had a conversation with somebody yesterday with the Giants, and obviously it always makes me laugh when people tell you this. It's like, yeah, Saquon's begging to play. He wants to play. The swelling has gone down significantly, so that's always good. But I do think there's a fair shot he gets in, knowing that they need him, but also how much he's campaigning to get in here.
This is another guy who I think his future probably has to be on his mind. He's going to be a free agent after this year. He's campaigning for his next job. So a lot of different competing potentially motivations going on with that injury and whether or not we're going to see him sooner rather than later. Last one I wanted to hit very quickly. David Bakhtiari inactive for the last 2 weeks for the Packers. They're on a short week this week, facing the Lions on Thursday night. What is the latest on his knee and just what we can expect moving forward? Because it really did feel like at some point this summer that even if we weren't out of the woods with the lingering effects of that knee injury over the last couple years, that they had found a good maintenance program for him, that he was going to be able to be on the field more often than not. But that has not been the case through 3 games so far.
He said it was the best he's felt. This is the best he's felt. And now in September, he's already missed 2 games and could potentially miss another. They're trying. I have not been told he's out yet. But we know that there was some chatter was about, whether or not it was because he didn't want to play on the turf or the grass. That was killed by him. He said that had nothing to do with it, that it is a true injury. And when I spoke with somebody with the Packers organization, they shared the same sentiment, saying this is just part of him right now. This was a surgery he got 2 years ago. It obviously didn't go great. And now this is just lingering. And we know how different the Green Bay Packers are with him on the field. And they're obviously going to try to do everything to get him on there.
Last thing, very quickly, one of the big stories of this week is the video that has been kind of making the rounds of the Mac Jones Sauce Gardner incident. Sauce came out after the game, I believe, and said Mac Jones hit him in the private parts, is the phrase that he used. I think this video was sent to you. You got to look at it. And I'm curious not only what the video shows, but more so, what has been the reaction to the video from people around the league and from players specifically that you've talked to?
Yeah, so from what I understand, the league is not going to be suspending Mac Jones for this. I think worst case scenario for him would be a fine. Best case scenario is they don't think that they have enough evidence to show that he actually hit Sauce Gardner in the private parts. By the way, I'm learning way too much about this behavior. In fact, like I don't even know how to really word it. And I really, this is a space where I really lean into the men in my life to explain it to me. As a mother with 2 boys, I feel like I probably need to get better with the terminology. But I've messed up the wording a million times. But let's just call it a cup slap. A cup slap for now.
Cup check,
I feel comfortable using those 2 words. Yeah, so the video that I got from a source, it was just a closer view. I posted it on my Twitter if you want to check it out. And you can see more of the reaction from Sauce than you can actually see the cup shot. It's more just, and according to the men in my life, when there's a hesitation, I can't believe we're having this conversation right now. There's a delay for you guys, and then you react. And I guess you can see the delay, and then Sauce kind of back into it, knowing that the pain was there. So it looks that way, but more importantly, reaction from around the league. I had some players shoot me some texts. I've had some players DM me that I'm not even really, I don't really cover that often. And they shared like that Mac has done some dirty things and that this is known in circles around the league. And I'm curious how much worse is this going to get, and if he's going to see some retaliation in games.
That was going to be my question, not the league sanctioned punishment that might come, but are guys just going to be fed up with this at a certain point, and it's going to lead to some sort of incident down the road? Because it kind of does feel like we're trending in that direction where somebody's going to react in a way that is one step further than what we've seen so far.
Yeah, I agree. I think we should have a segment every single week just called Cup Slap, and we'll just talk about the really weird topics in the league.
That's on that note. That's all we have for this week. Really appreciate you guys tuning in every single Tuesday. The Russini Report right here live on YouTube. Dianna, thank you very much for the time. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys.